Ghanaians believe that their transformation will not occur on the back of parties, but on the back of leadership. It's a question of leadership. Ghanaians believe that their transformation will not occur on the back of parties, but on the back of leadership. It's a question of leadership.
Welcome to this week's edition of Alan Speaks with me, Kwame Owusu-Danso. I'm super elated to be sitting again with the one and only Alan Kojo Kyerematen. This week we're talking agriculture mixed with tourism, and I'm very sure that you are excited about this conversation especially because in Ghana you do know that our forte is really agriculture, and our mainstay is agriculture. So a lot of you will be interested in this conversation, and you want to know what the great transformational plan will be presenting to the good people of Ghana in respect of agriculture. Welcome, Honorable Alan, and thank you very much for availing yourself again for us this week.
Thank you, Kody.
So this week we are talking about agriculture, and I'm excited about it particularly because of what we are into as Ghanaians.
Yes.
First of all, give us a general overview of the agricultural sector, and then we'll look at the specifics in relation to how we are going to execute the policies therein.
Very well. As you rightly pointed out, agriculture is the mainstay of the Ghanaian economy, and that's without doubt. But if you consider the amount of money that has been pumped into agriculture since independence, I'm not sure that we've been able to optimize the outcomes from our investments in agriculture. So the GTP is proposing that we take agriculture to the next level. And for agriculture to be transformed, there are 4 critical elements that need to be taken care of.
Okay.
One is it has to be market driven.
Okay.
Number 2, it must be technology led. Number 3, it must optimize value to farmers. And number 4, it must be on large scale economies of scale. That is what will lead to enhanced agricultural production. The reason why it has to be market led is that almost invariably, if you're producing to meet a market demand, then obviously you'll be successful. Secondly, it has to be technology driven because that's where the element of productivity comes in. Yes, you can increase production, but if it is technology driven, then there's an element of enhanced productivity.
Okay.
So you get better yields from, let's say, the same acreage of land that you use. Number 3, I was talking about the fact that it must optimize value to farmers. The reason why our young people are not so motivated to go into agriculture is because they do not see it as business.
Right.
And they don't really see the value of agriculture to farmers. And so if you want to transform agriculture, then that element of value to the farmers must be front burner issue. And as I said, last but not the least, yes, smallholder farming it's critical because many of our farmers have small acreages and small land holdings. But if you're talking about transformed agriculture, then obviously you need to go beyond smallholder farming and then also develop large-scale commercial farms.
Right.
So these are the 4 critical considerations that would underpin any agricultural transformation agenda. So it is these 4 key considerations that have driven the policy prescriptions under the GTP for us to have a new agricultural revolution.
No, I like the fact that you've actually highlighted the 4 key pillars,
Yes.
right? But also it is important to understand what your identification of the problems are,
Yes.
so that we can now look at the solutions that you've proffered.
Yes.
So can you highlight what the problems are? Because I see that you've mentioned a number of issues
Yes.
in your policy,
Yes, yes.
and then you've preferred solutions to them, even though yes, you've highlighted the 4 pillars, but also let's understand what the issues are. Because I think last week in our conversation in respect of industrialization, you consistently explained that you do not understand why cocoa has been the center stage of our the main commodity that we export.
Yes, yes.
Right, and cocoa obviously flows from agriculture. So I mean, let's look at the issues that we have relative to agriculture, and then we look at the solutions that you have proffered in your policy to addressing that.
So first is low production and low productivity.
Very well. Okay.
That is fundamental.
Okay.
And without increased production, increased productivity, you can't make money out of agriculture.
Yes.
So that is the fundamental issue. The second one is harvest, post-harvest losses.
Losses. Yes. Yeah.
See, if you increase production and you are unable to store and preserve what you produce, then you don't extend the shelf life of whatever you've produced. And that becomes a constraint in terms of your ability to distribute and market. So you need to increase production. It's a major issue. Low production and low productivity.
Yeah.
And then post-harvest losses.
Yeah. You also speak about weak leveraging of private sector investment.
Yes.
That's critical.
Yes, because...
And then finally, sorry,
Yes.
you speak about poor management of investment, ineffective harmonization, and alignment beyond the things that you mentioned.
Yes,
Also, you talk
yes.
about ineffective harmonization and alignment of donors' interventions
Yes.
to government's priorities,
Yes, yeah.
weak leveraging of private sector investment, and poor public sector accountability, are the things that you highlighted as part of the problem.
Because
Yeah, exactly.
if there's poor management of investments, including the fact that you're unable to attract investments into agriculture, then obviously you cannot increase production.
Right.
So if we consider agriculture as a business, then it takes agricultural production and productivity away from government. You need to get the private sector to invest in agriculture. So that's where the poor management
Right.
of investments come in. But again, it is also important to harmonize and align donors' interventions. So, our economy has been driven by donor interventions for many years. And admittedly, they provide significant resources to support agriculture.
For the person in Chimasafo, can you explain what the donor intervention is?
Okay,
Then
very
we go
good.
to
Very good. We have countries who provide support, financial support, technical assistance support to Ghana. Those are bilateral, I would call them development partners.
Okay.
And in Ghana, we are very lucky. We have those from the west and from the east.
I just want us to
You have
crystallize because
those from Europe, from Asia, from North America, all these bilateral countries that support our development agenda, including agriculture, we will describe them as development partners or bilateral donors. Now, any support they provide in the area of agricultural development will be part of the donor interventions to support agriculture. And it could be in the area of facilitating access to financing.
Right.
It could be in the area of research, improved technologies, so many other areas that they provide support. But then you can also have multilateral institutions like the World Bank.
Right.
Then IFAD. IFAD is International Fund for Agricultural Development. You have the African Development Bank. All these are multilateral institutions that also provide support, financial, technical, to assist agricultural development in our country. So what we are saying here is that there is ineffective harmonization and alignment of donor interventions in government priorities. So if, for example, Ghana decides that we want to move beyond cocoa and we want to expand our crop production, you may find that a particular country or multilateral institution that is supporting Ghana in its agricultural development may not necessarily be interested in maize production. If you want to produce cassava and the priorities of the countries that support you are not aligned to government priorities, then obviously that is a problem. So that's where the harmonization of donor all these countries, bilateral donors and multilateral institutions, almost invariably are doing things that fit into their own agenda
Right.
for development aid.
Right. Right.
It's always a problem.
Before we look at the proposals that you've made, you know, and looking at the two pillars that will help deal with the issues, that's the solution that you prepared. I just want us to practicalize it because I do remember that in 2008, I traveled to Ivory Coast. I went by road.
Okay.
And on my way to Ivory Coast, I saw a large plantation of palm, you know, palm trees.
Yeah, palm trees.
You know, when you're after Takoradi, you're heading
I
towards,
know, yes.
you know. And then I asked myself, why is it that Ghana has not invested in that? I think last week you made mention of that. You
yes, I was talking
about Malaysia
yes,
and things like that.
oil palm. Yeah.
When you are descending, when you are flying to Tamale and you are descending, you see large tracts of land.
Yes.
There.
Yeah.
Nobody is doing anything with them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Why is it that we have refused, or rather failed, to make huge investments in agriculture? To the extent that, you know, we've allowed our neighbors to you know, go into serious agriculture and then exporting their produce to Ghana. Now we import almost everything, tomato from Burkina Faso, even kontomire, you know, and all of that.
Plantain.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, what would you do differently to ensure that we are able to produce internally, be self-sufficient, and then also export same?
Well,
before you even look at the two thematic areas that
yes,
sir.
It comes back to what I had mentioned earlier on. Poor management of investments.
Yes.
So you're talking about investments from government, investments from the private sector.
Indeed.
In agriculture.
Indeed.
Now, if those investments are not tied into the development priorities of the country, then obviously you will find a situation where, as you said, why is Cote d'Ivoire producing so much of palm oil or oil palm and we are not? So first is the political direction, and that leads to policy prioritization. It makes it difficult to appreciate why Ghana has focused all these years only on developing the cocoa sector,
Absolutely.
because there's nothing or nobody that is constraining us from diversifying our cultural production activities. So that's basically the issue that we are trying to deal with. Policy prioritization. And it is a policy prioritization that will lead to the investments that will be made in agriculture. It also fits into the 4 pillars that I was talking about.
Yeah.
If your agriculture is not market-led, then you have a problem. So oil palm is a major commodity that is globally traded. So if your agriculture is market-led, then obviously on your radar, you'll find that oil palm is a major export commodity. So your agriculture then is tied into what the market is looking for. If you're producing cocoa, for example, and there's no demand for cocoa, obviously then your policy will not be an optimal one. If you decide to produce, let's say, maize, and you are not competitive in the global production of maize compared to what other countries are doing, then you would always have a problem in even exporting or even competing on the local market.
So I love the appreciation that you have intimated in the policy that there's the need for that aggressive policy intervention.
Yes.
To resolve all these issues that we have in the agricultural sector. But before we go to the 2 pillars,
Okay.
that you have highlighted, it's important to also understand where we are as a nation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you are aware of Planting for Food and Jobs, which has been introduced by this administration, ostensibly to deal with the issues that we have in the agricultural sector, and also to produce enough for us to be able to, survive as a nation. What do you think has been the problem with the implementation of it and the sustainability of it? Because when you become president, I'm sure that you are going to have to review all of these interventions, and then you can introduce your own policies that will help augment that which has already been started by this administration and then better it. So why do you think it failed? And then we look at the two policies. Because that's failed.
I would say that
yes, please.
it was a good policy and it still is a good policy. My own view is that it can be improved.
So it lacks that
it can be improved
will.
for a number of reasons.
Okay.
Number one, the Planting for Food and Jobs, as the brand or the name suggests, is that the program is encouraging Ghanaians to plant, to create employment, and then also to help with food security.
Indeed.
So because of the brand and the description of the program, the government decided to identify a number of product areas to focus on. So there was rice, there was vegetables, there was maize, and 2 others. I think about 5 different products. No, plantain was actually not part of it.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
So they specifically targeted a certain number of commodities.
Okay.
Now, as to whether those are the priority commodities that would best serve our interests, we'll need to interrogate that, particularly now that we've had, let's say, almost 8 years of implementation of the program. So first is the coverage, the product coverage. That's part of the review that needs to be done. Number two is the focus on just small-scale farmers, because essentially it was designed to assist smallholder farmers. As I mentioned earlier on, whilst that is good, while that is important, if we are looking at economies of scale, then you need to go beyond small-scale farming if you want to transform agriculture. So that is another area that has to be interrogated. Number three were the areas of support under the Planting for Food and Jobs program.
Okay.
You know, it was providing improved seed varieties. It was providing extension support. And then it was also providing fertilizer support for farmers. So we need also to be able to interrogate, are these the kinds of assistance that the farmers actually need? And if so, is it sustainable for government to continue along that path? Those are areas of interrogation that is required. But I mean, to be fair, I would say that it had some positive outcomes in terms of increasing the yield in the selected commodity areas. But you would realize that in spite of all the support that was provided, prices were still very high. Prices were still very high over that period. And then also the support, the financial and funding support from government has not been sustained, meaning that there's so much that needs to be done
with very little investment
if we want to maintain the program. It has to be overhauled. As I said, if you are supplying fertilizers and you are unable to sustain the supply of subsidized fertilizers, then you have to interrogate it. Is it sustainable? Although the original purpose of it was to increase the use of fertilizers by small-scale farmers to improve their yield. So I would say that there's been some positive outcomes. But if you look at the challenges that have been associated with the program, it requires an in-depth interrogation and assessment of areas where improvement would be useful.
Brilliant answer, as always. So you're looking at two broad thematic areas that you want to introduce to address, the challenge that we have relative to the agricultural sector, and of course that will find expression in the policy that you are going to be interested in. Let's deal with the first area. You're looking at enhancing agricultural production and productivity. Now, reading the policy, I was excited, and the reason why I was excited was I cited you an example of the northern region, where when you're flying to the northern region and you are descending, you see vast lands and which have not been put to any use. In your policy, you have identified specific regions, and in identifying the specific regions, you're saying that. So, for instance, for the northern part, you're going to make it a food hub. More like the bread basket of West Africa. Can you tell us how you intend to do that? And the other, the Bono area and all of that you highlighted in the first part of the thematic area, so that we can.
So first, our proposal under the GTP is to establish what we call agro-parks. Now, agro-parks are specially designated enclaves that have been established to support large-scale commercial farming. Remember, we are talking about enhancing agricultural production and productivity
Yes.
if we want to transform agriculture.
Absolutely.
So how do we do it?
Okay.
Our first proposal is that let us establish agro-parks and processing centers. So this would mean that government would facilitate the acquisition of large tracts of land from different parts of the country. So you're talking about flying over the northern part of Ghana, large tracts of land, nothing is happening. So immediately this becomes an attractive candidate for the establishment of an agro park. And if you acquire about 5,000 to 10,000 acres or hectares of agricultural land to establish an agro park, the next step will be to bring all that is required to support farming or agricultural production, including irrigation. So it's not just a question of acquiring large tracts of land. So you draw in irrigation facilities into the enclave. At the same time, you try to establish processing centers or processing facilities within the agro park. You also, within the same park, you also have those who are supplying agrochemicals. Within the same center, you have companies that are established specifically to support the marketing and distribution of the products. So an agro park that is focused on, let's say, maize production would have maize processing facility, it would have input suppliers, it will have irrigation, and then it will have a financial support center. This makes it much, much easier for a farmer who wants to go into large-scale agricultural farming to locate within the agro park, and then within that enclave, every service or facility that is required for him or her to succeed is within reach. So it's almost like providing an environment that facilitates enhanced agricultural production and productivity for a farmer. If you are not within an enclave, obviously you have to produce and then go and find a processing company, maybe miles away. You may now have to go and approach input supplies of including fertilizers from some other location. You may need to travel to a bank to look for financing. But if all these supply centers are within the enclave, then obviously you have the right environment that will support enhanced agricultural production. So the focus is on establishing these agro parks throughout the country. But for purposes of prioritization, the GTP is focusing on having the 5 northern regions become the breadbasket for West Africa, not just for Ghana, meaning that you would identify many of these agro parks in the 5 northern regions. It doesn't mean that other regions would not have agro parks established in their regions.
Right. My excitement flows from what I told you earlier, that the fact that you are not only limiting the expansion of agriculture to only one region.
Yes.
You've actually identified the various regions, their strengths and their weaknesses, and you are saying that I'm going to do X, Y, Z in this particular region and that particular region. I mean, Oti region, you are looking at fishing. Aquaculture.
Inland fishing.
I love it.
Yes.
And the cocoa growing areas, I'm sure your focus is going to be on cocoa and how we can expand cocoa in that area as well. Yeah. Before you delve deeper into that, let me just go for this quick break. I'll be right back, and then we can focus on the other aspects of it. Quick break. Stay with us. Alan Speaks Primetime Show.
for my bank. I say, what time me I got the winnie? I say, you be who know me who be winnie. I say, the echo so the so winnie. I say, you be the question about baby me. I say, the ref is a bit dry on my. I say, Alan Cash. I say, the this car calls up on wine. I say, and the car labash. I say, that's a blue and bar. I say, never play balu. I say, my hand in the bride. I say, everything I do. I say, before shine your eye. I say, before you shine your shoe. I say, go I won't nine it. I say, you want to welcome boo. I say, hey, I say, I say, Munjai, I say, I say, I they come like Alan Cash. I say, Alan Cash, plenty money for my bank. I say, for my bank. I say, I say, I say, Munjai, I say, I say, I they come like Alan Cash. I say.
Welcome back. This is Alan Speaks. My name is Kwame Owusu-Danso. We're talking agriculture and what Honorable Alan Kojo Kyerematen will be doing for the good people of Ghana when he gets the opportunity to lead the country or to govern the country in 2025. And he has highlighted the problems. He is now telling us what he will do to address those problems. And obviously addressing those problems finds expression in the policy direction. Now we're talking about enhancing agricultural production and productivity. And in doing that, he is explaining to us the potentials that we have in all the regions in this country, the 16 regions. But of course, he can't explain, what he's going to do for all the regions because of time. But Honorable, you were explaining to us, what you have for the various regions. You started with the 5 regions in the northern region. Can you tell us, what you have for the other regions? I'm sure you cannot do all the regions, but just give us an idea of what you'll be doing in the other regions.
Very well. So apart from the 5
I know
regions,
that you traveled with your team across the country.
Apart from the 5 regions of the north, which are designated as the bread basket, but specifically for cereals production.
Yes, please.
And this is because I've traveled extensively in all the 5 regions of the northern part of the country. And it's very obvious that is where the concentration of cereal production can be optimized.
Absolutely.
Whether it is maize, whether it's millet, whether it's sorghum. So that is a reason why we are designating the 5 regions of the north as the center for crop cereal production. Now, when you move to OT, again, also consistent with the same principle of identifying the agricultural activity that the particular region has comparative advantage in.
Absolutely.
OT then now is designated, as we've indicated in the GTP, that the OT region will now become the new inland fishing and aquaculture and fish processing hub for West Africa. And because of the Volta Lake and the amount of aquaculture and inland fishing that has traditionally been associated with OT, this proposal is to enhance the development of OT region as the hub for inland fishing. Obviously, if you move now to Bono East, that's the middle belt regions, you have Bono East, Ahafo, and Western North. Again, if you travel extensively around those regions, you can immediately identify those regions as being the best, providing the best environment for tree crop production. So again, Bono East, Ahafo, and Western North now will become the new tree crops production and processing hub for West Africa. And all this is not just for Ghana, for West Africa, because we, as part of the GTP, we are looking at Ghana as the real gateway to West Africa. as I'm sure you're aware, Ghana currently is the second largest economy in West Africa.
Absolutely.
But if we are able to identify these hubs, or what we call centers of excellence, then it means that we are scaling up beyond the borders of Ghana to take advantage of the ECOWAS region. And hopefully we would now move further into Africa, particularly with the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Yeah.
So that's the OT region. Now, but I must say though,
Right.
that if you don't hear about other regions here, it's only because under the GTP, this concept of regional growth poles or centers of excellence is not only restricted to agriculture. So each region now is designated as a growth pole or a center of excellence for a specific activity. So if you take Western region, for example, yes, Western region has also very, very viable agricultural prospects. But then under the GTP, the center of excellence is a different function. So that now is the oil and gas hub for
Brilliant.
Africa.
Wow.
Now, if you go to Greater Accra,
Right.
we are now developing Greater Accra under the GTP as the new international financial center, like you have in New York, you have in London, you have in Zurich. So these are regional centers of excellence. Ashanti region becomes the new industrial and manufacturing hub for West Africa. And Volta region becomes the new skills hub for West Africa. Because if you look at, remember when we're discussing the new strategic anchor industries,
Yes. Yeah.
all the new exciting opportunities for industrial
Pharmaceuticals,
for vehicle assembly.
Yeah.
So the skills and the resource base that is required to feed all these new, I would say, industrial sectors, the skills center now will be the Volta region. So you can see that all these 16 regions have become centers of excellence, depending on the uniqueness that we believe will be associated with the region. Eastern region will become the new research and innovation center for West Africa. You go to the United States, Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley was specially created and designated as the technology hub for the United States of America. This was an intentional policy decision. If you go to Kansas and the middle belt of the United States, that is the breadbasket of the United States. So each region has a particular focus or a center of excellence that is going to be developed. So we don't want it to seem as if, well, we didn't hear about other regions when we are discussing agricultural production. Because the fact that you create a center of excellence for cereal production in the 5 regions of the north does not mean that you cannot do cereal production in other parts of the yes.
Do you know I'm smiling? It tells me that you've actually identified the problems that we have.
Oh, absolutely.
And you have preferred solutions. It's not like you are just sitting in your room and you are just putting pen to paper. You've actually visited the regions and you've
identified the kind of comparative advantage that can be developed for each region.
You are my Kwame
so that you don't leave any region behind.
You are my Kwame Nkrumah.
Yes.
So all of that collectively would dovetail into strengthening mass participation in agricultural activities.
Yes. Well, it even goes beyond that.
Right.
These regional centers of excellence for agricultural production is really designed generally to increase agricultural production through the agro parks that I discussed. But beyond that, beyond the agro parks, the GTP is also proposing that we should have mass participation of Ghanaian citizens in agriculture. Under General Champon, we had Operation Feed Yourself.
Yeah.
But Operation Feed Yourself was primarily meant to incentivize or encourage Ghanaians to do farming to feed themselves. So that is, I would say, more of subsistence farming. And that's why it was focused more on backyard gardening. That was mainly what people were doing. So the nature of the intervention would dictate the kind of activity that emerges from that. Now, what the mass participation in agricultural production, that campaign goes beyond Operation Feed Yourself. There are two campaigns under this particular pillar.
Okay.
It's and we've branded it. It says Operation Own a Farm. That's the first one. Operation Own a Farm. That's every Ghanaian citizen now will be encouraged to own a farm as a business. And then Operation Farm for Life. So similar
like
to
that.
Operation Feed Yourself. Now this is every Ghanaian being encouraged to own a farm as a business, because we are looking at enhancing agricultural production, increasing agricultural production and productivity. How are you going to do it? One is through the agro parks. Number two is through mass participation in agricultural production. And that's where these two campaigns actually come in. And obviously, if you want to get Ghanaians to start thinking about owning a farm for themselves as a business,
That's be profitable.
then this is a big thing.
You know, the reason why I spoke about the fact that, you know, the mass participation also finds a little bit of expression in at the agro parks is because I live in Accra. I can go to Oti region, you know, because there's that opportunity to go into aquaculture business.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I know that is the hub.
That's the hub.
Exactly.
Yes,
I mean, if I want to, you know, invest in millet or rice, I can
Then
go
you
to
go
the
to the- yes,
absolutely.
yes.
So of course, that's also mass participation. Then everybody, wherever it is that you are in this country, if you are so interested in agriculture, you can just pick it up.
And this is going to be the real revolution in agriculture. Getting if you go to Botswana, for example, the reason why Botswana is one of the leading countries exporting beef, top quality beef throughout the world, is because literally every Botswana citizen owns a cow or a number of cows. You know, so it was a deliberate, intentional policy of the Botswana government to encourage mass participation in livestock.
Brilliant idea. How do we finance it?
No, this is government incentivizing. So remember we talked in our macroeconomy discussion about government incentivizing the banks to finance agricultural production. We talked about low guarantee schemes.
Yes.
We talked about venture capital financing. So all the things that we discussed under the macroeconomic pillar will come into play now when you are looking at mass participation in agriculture. So for example, if KOD now taking a cue from this beautiful program, Operation Own a Farm, decides that you go and farm in one part of the country, then the efforts that have already been discussed at getting various banks to enhance agricultural lending, that will come in handy to support individuals.
Well, I grew up in Asante Mampong.
Interesting.
Yes, my dad was a police officer, so you know.
Okay.
And when I was much younger, I was always in the farms working. So I like the fact that you're talking about Operation Own a Farm, because it goes beyond just feeding yourself.
Yes.
Owning the farm also means that if you are able to
You
produce more, you sell.
additional income.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So so and this is all
Mm.
tied into the concept of an enterprise economy, which the GTP is promoting.
I asked about the financing because with mass participation, one has to look at financing schemes.
Yes,
as well.
okay,
But I'm happy that
okay.
you've explained that.
Yes, but in that regard,
Yes, please.
the GTP is specifically proposing that we introduce a differentiated agricultural credit and financing scheme.
Yes.
You see, so apart from what the banks will be doing under the macro framework, this is specifically proposing that we introduce a differentiated agricultural credit and finance. What does this mean? It means that the banks will be incentivized to provide lending and credit for agriculture below existing commercial rates, specifically to support and promote agriculture. Because through the research that we have done, any financing of agricultural projects that has an interest rate above 10% will be a risky venture.
Absolutely.
It will not yield the positive outcomes. So if banks are lending to the general public at 20%, particularly for agricultural lending, the rules and the regulations now would require a differentiated interest rate specifically to promote agriculture.
Wow. So, and beyond that is also the fact that you want to establish a coordinated integrated agricultural research company.
Yeah.
Is it the same as that which you explained relative to the Eastern region, that you're going to have like a research hub? Is it similar to that, or this is different?
Interesting. It's good that you brought this up. Now, the concept of Eastern region as a research and innovation hub, it's slightly different because
it's
this
general.
is general.
Okay.
So this is general research and innovation.
Okay.
But particularly for agricultural technology, and then it means that this commercial company could actually then be established within the,
Absolutely.
within
in the Eastern
Eastern
region.
So then it makes
so
it consistent.
So what you're saying that we can have, let's say, agricultural research center in the Eastern region. We can have financial research center. We can have data and digitalization.
Yes.
We can have governance. We can have, I get
But
what you're saying.
Purely based on technology and innovation.
Okay.
Technology and innovation.
Yeah.
But here, the challenge has always been that you have CSR and very strong research capability.
Yep.
But for all these years, it has been difficult to transfer research findings or new technologies that have been developed through research, to transfer these new technologies into commercial production. That has always been the difficulty, bridging the gap between research and actual production. So the idea of establishing a company, and this is what it says, establish an integrated agricultural research company, is to create a business entity that will move research findings and technologies into commercial production. Because it's not going to happen by chance. If you don't intentionally and deliberately create a mechanism for the research findings and the new technologies to move into commercial production, the research findings would remain as they are now in the research institutions.
Climate change is a big problem for most people who want to invest in agriculture. How do you intend to deal with that when you get
it's all part of this response to integrated research for agricultural production. And specifically, what the GTP has proposed is that we promote climate smart technologies that will mitigate climate change effects on agricultural production. Because again, we know the negative impact of climate change on agricultural production and productivity. And one of the new technologies that will be promoted under the GTP is to actually produce rain. To produce rain. I mean, we introduce
it's been done in Dubai, so it's possible, yeah.
Yes, you introduce new technology to produce rain and harvest that, so that you can have a whole year long and year round agricultural production.
I'm happy you don't want to take the seat to Kumasi. But so let's look at the final 2 points. You want to promote local assembling and manufacturing of agricultural machinery and equipment, and then you want to strengthen agricultural institutions and their governance system. I think that you've already explained that in a way.
Yeah.
But let's look at the assembling of manufacturing of agricultural machinery. Finds expression in what we spoke about when we talked about industrialization.
Yes.
You said that you were going to ensure that there's that.
Yes, absolutely. Because you can't have an agricultural revolution and not have the machinery and equipment on being deployed on a very wide scale. And I remember we mentioned the fact that why should you be importing tractors?
Yeah.
If you want to have a real agricultural revolution, you should be able to assemble the tractors locally.
Indeed.
So it's not just tractors, it's assembling locally and manufacturing locally different types of agricultural machinery and equipment. Remember, we're still focusing on enhancing agricultural production and being able to manufacture your own equipment, making it widely available to farmers, clearly would support this agenda of increasing production.
The final one on the list has to do with agricultural marketing and distribution. One district, one warehouse. Do you remember that?
Yes. Well, if you produce,
one issue, one
if you
store
produce
and then distribute.
Yes, if you produce,
Right.
you have to store and then distribute.
Absolutely.
And you distribute to the markets.
Yes.
And we have had a major problem on our hands in this country. First, because of post-harvest losses, and then also the lack of efficient and effective marketing and distribution systems. So the GTP is proposing that we must invest in agricultural marketing and distribution, and particularly in post-harvest systems. How do you do this? First, the GTP is proposing that we create what we call private licensed food distribution and marketing companies. This is something that will completely revolutionize agricultural marketing and distribution. You recall, many years back, we had food distribution company, but that was state-owned, and they did a fantastic job by moving into farming communities and then bringing foodstuffs from the farms into the urban centers and peri-urban centers. That is bridging the gap between the farms and the markets. But unfortunately, as you know, everything driven by the state turns out not to be sustainable. So what this proposal is meant to do is to create a private sector vehicle for food marketing and distribution. So in every district, we would have 2 or 3 private sector companies that have been licensed to buy and procure foodstuffs from farms all over the district and bring these foodstuffs to market centers, working with the market queens. And this deals specifically with how to transport foodstuffs from the farms to the market, which has always been the problem. And the reason why government is supporting the private sector to do this and actually licensing them is because government has an interest in making sure that the transportation of foodstuffs from farms to market is done efficiently and then also cost effectively. Because if you leave it to market forces, then you have a situation where the incidence of profiteering then contributes to high food prices. But in the cocoa industry, for example, you know, they have licensed buying companies. These are private sector companies that are competing with the government produce PBC. And they buy cocoa from all over the country and then bring the cocoa to depots for cocoa board. It's the same concept. In this particular case, you are licensing companies, private sector companies, that will haul and cart foodstuffs in every district from the farms to the marketing centers, working with the market queens. And I mean, I don't know whether you were old enough to know at that time that there were such private companies, Ashanti Foods.
I heard of it, I read of it.
Yeah, Ashanti Foods, for example, was a very robust company that was buying foods from all over Ashanti region and bringing them to the market centers. So this is going to create a major revolution in agricultural marketing and distribution. Why do we have tomatoes, yam, all kinds of crops and grains that remain, you know, in our farms without the advantage of having them carted to market centers at reasonable prices? So this is the reason for the establishment.
We're done with agriculture, but I just finally want us to look at how you can leverage after.
Well,
You know,
after
yeah.
becomes an important part of this whole marketing and distribution, I would say, regime. Because if you produce, you have to sell. If we are able to enhance local production, as the GTP is proposing, then it means that we can go beyond the domestic market now to be able to sell throughout Africa without duty free. Because that's the whole essence of having, as I pointed out in the beginning, a market-driven agriculture.
So you are making a solemn promise to our market women that they should vote for you, and when they do that, you would make sure that the price of a bag of onion, you know, would not be sold.
Will automatically come down, because these licensed marketing distribution companies, who will be supported by government would actually provide the seed funding for them to acquire, trucks that will be used to haul goods. And then that
also the
will be,
financing scheme.
Yes, the financing scheme. So that will be the link between the farmers or the farming community and then the market queens. So the market queens no longer have to be thinking about, so how do we get, foodstuffs coming into the market at reasonable prices? That is the key.
Right. That is indeed the key. You're still watching Alan Speaks Primetime Show. My name is Kwame Osuda. So quick commercial break. When we return, we'll be touching on tourism. And I'm sure you are very interested in that subject matter. Rwanda, as a small country, is able to raise about $100 million to $200 million just from tourism alone. And that is how, they are able to survive and sustain their economy. So let's see what Honorable Alan Kyerematen has for us in respect of tourism. Stay with us, don't move a muscle.
For my bank, I say. What time me I got that when I say. You be who know me who be when I say. Here goes the S so when I say. Obi the coins to buy me me. I say. The ref is a bit dry one I say. Alan Cash, I say. In this car call is up on wine. I say. And the car bash, I say. That's a blue caliber, I say. Never buy balu, I say. My life in the bride, I say. Everything I do, I say. Before shine your eye, I say. Before you shine your shoe, I say. Where I want nine it, I say. You want to work and boo, I say. Hey, de, I say. De, I say. Munjai de, I say. De, I say. I dey come like Alan Cash, I say. Alan Cash, I say. Plenty money for my bank, I say. For my bank, I say. De, I say. De, I say. Munjai de, I say. De, I say. I dey come like Alan Cash, I say.
Welcome back to Alan Speaks Primetime Show. My name again is Kwame Owusu-Dan. So we've been talking to Honorable Alan Kyerematen on agriculture. Now, though, we're going to be talking about tourism. And before the break, I told you how other countries are making a lot of money from tourism. Singapore, Dubai, even in Africa. You're looking at Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania. What have we been making as Ghanaians from tourism? Now, you do know that tourism is one of the fastest growing industries in the services sector in Ghana. Okay, and it contributes significantly to the country's GDP. But are we really benefiting from tourism? I know that government has sought to introduce some policies in respect of tourism. I do know that there have been some specific introductions in relation to bringing back people from the diaspora to Ghana. Year of Return has been introduced, December to Dirty December, and all of these other events have been introduced primarily to increase the involvement of people in tourism and to generate some form of excitement. I've seen and read the policy of Alan Kojo Kyerematen in respect of expanding tourism beyond the peripheries of what has been introduced by government, and he is seeking to actually make it a people-centered, policy. So we're going to be speaking to him on that for a better explanation and expansion of the specificities in relation to tourism. Honorable, tourism. I love tourism, and I know that we can generate so much from tourism. Now, you have decided to look at tourism from a different perspective. I do know that government, and I like it. This Year of Return is beautiful. It's brilliant. I love it. But what are you going to do differently so that we can generate so much more from tourism?
The tourism policy package under the GTP responds to the challenges in the tourism sector.
Okay.
First is about tourism infrastructure. You were talking so eloquently about other African countries where tourism is a major economic driver. One of the reasons why that is the case in those countries is because there's a lot of investment in tourism infrastructure. If you don't invest in tourism infrastructure or tourism sites or locations, you don't have a tourist industry. And that is why for us under the GTP, under an Alan presidency, the number one policy prescription or solution is to enhance investments in tourism infrastructure and facilities. And how do we do this? Instead of government thinking about borrowing or using government revenue to develop these tourist sites, the GTP, in line with its focus on building an enterprise economy, is rather proposing that government should incentivize the private sector to invest in tourist
This is the government, you mean your government?
Alan's government,
Okay.
under Alan's presidency. That will be the focus. To move away from government being the major or primary financing vehicle for tourism, to government incentivizing the private sector to develop tourist facilities and sites. And there's evidence that this is the only sustainable way. I must have made mention of this particular example in one of our earlier episodes, where if you go to the Mole Game Park, for a very long time, such a rich tourist resource has been completely underutilized. Why? Because government over the years has not been able to invest in the construction of high-grade tourist facilities. There used to be a motel, a low-grade accommodation, hotel accommodation at the Mole Park. When government provided incentives for a private investor to build what I would call a medium facility, privately owned medium-sized facility in the game park, it has completely transformed the Mole Park. And now it's always fully booked for a long time, and fully booked even though it's even expensive because of the tourist facilities and the infrastructure that has been developed by a private person. So that is the only model that works in all the major tourist destinations. It is not government that owns the tourist facilities. It's the private sector supported by government. So it is a straightforward. The focus must be on private sector investments in tourism, infrastructure, and facilities.
I was in Paga some time ago. I mean,
crocodile.
about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, no, not 4 years ago. Maybe a long time ago. We wanted to sleep in Paga, but we couldn't get an affordable hotel. So this is what you're talking about.
Yes.
That, you ensure that government creates that environment for the private sector to be interested in investing hugely in infrastructure.
Yes.
If not necessarily taking over the tourist sites, but also, just to build facilities around it. So that it will encourage people to,
typically, a tourist site, it's for the people, it's government's property.
Yeah.
But then the infrastructure and facilities around it that allows and attracts tourists to the site. That's what we are talking about. And I must also have mentioned in one of our episodes, but Ghana has 32 of the world's heritage sites.
The forts,
The forts and castles.
Yeah, out of 42,
This is
we have
incredible.
32. Yeah.
We have 32.
Yeah.
And these are sites and locations that, if properly invested in and developed, can attract so many tourists into our country. We travel from Ghana to destinations, to tourist locations, which in terms of touristic value may be nothing compared to our forts and castles. But lo and behold, there is no investment going into our castles. And that is what we are talking about.
So what happens to hotels that are already existing? Those around the tourist sites, the ones that are already in existence.
It only means that if they are currently owned by the private sector, they have to be upgraded.
Okay.
and it will be under the same program of government providing incentives to the private sector, either to upgrade existing facilities or to construct new ones. So, for example, this Mole Park example that I was giving, there was already some accommodation there, but government attracted a private investor now to develop new infrastructure. You know Senchi.
Yeah, I don't know. Royal St.
You know, Royal Senchi. See, all these tourist, I would say, facilities and infrastructure, these are all private investments. But are we waiting for government to find the money, which it will never find, now to develop some of these facilities? No, it's counterproductive. So that's the first. The second one is facilitating support for tourism in general. And again, we're talking specifically about first making sure that our visa regime, our visa requirements for tourists coming to Ghana becomes as flexible as possible. You can't develop Ghana as a prime tourist destination and then have a situation where to get a visa to come to Ghana is problematic. So that's the first thing. And then it also talks about the fact that we strengthen government and public sector institutions that promote and support tourism. We have the Ghana Tourist Authority, Ghana Tourist Development Company. At any rate, if we do an audit of these institutions, we will find that there will be the need to consolidate some of them. But it doesn't really matter. Even if there's one national institution dedicated to supporting the tourist industry, then government must provide support, build the capacity of these government institutions to promote tourism. That happens everywhere in the world. If you look at these countries that you were referring to, the type of state institutions that support tourism in Rwanda is...
You know, there are different types of tourism. And in Rwanda, for instance, they are very intentional about asking people to come to Rwanda.
Yeah.
Very, very intentional about it. And they have invested hugely in that, you know, space to ensure that when people come to Rwanda, they are very comfortable. So security is one of them. How clean the environment is, how people, you know, are able to procure even lands for the purposes of, because beyond tourism is also the possibility of people establishing businesses and investing in the country. So are you going to also look at all of that? Because it's very crucial that we consider that. Because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine in the UK, and he said he wants to visit Ghana, I mean, for the first time. And he was asking me, how can he buy land, for instance, you know? And so I said, well, all of these issues.
I'm happy you've pointed this out, because it anchors the issue that I was alluding to earlier on, that this government or state institutions that are supposed to support tourism have to be first-class institutions. And it's not a question of just the specific institution directly promoting tourism. You talked about even security. It means that our national security apparatus, which is part of government machinery, must all be tailored to ensuring the safety of tourists. You talked about environment. Yes, it is not directly, one will not say that it's directly promoting tourism, but in a sense, it is, because you need to keep your cities clean, and then Ghana will become an attractive destination. So the state and public sector institutions that facilitate and promote tourism must be strengthened. And of course, we've also talked about providing support to private sector groups and organizations that promote and facilitate tourism. So it's not just supporting government institutions. Under an Allen presidency, we'll make sure that government has a package to assist tour operators, those in different tours, I would say, entities, because they are private, but government has an interest in promoting tourism. So government would then support these private sector companies, agencies, and institutions, even though they are private, to be able to enhance our tourism attraction. Because government will earn revenue and then it will create jobs. So government has an interest in supporting the private sector.
Are we going to be intentional about developing some specific regions as tourism hubs? And I make this point because, again, when you're descending the northern region, you can see vast lands. You have indicated to us that you're going to make sure that there's some agricultural hub, created there. But also, if you look at Dubai, it was predominantly a desert country. Now it's been transformed and things like that. Would you be specific to say that, yes, I do know that we have the forts. You've mentioned that, if you look at all the 42, 32 is from Ghana. Would you be also intentional about developing specific regions, maybe beautifying them? I don't know what you're going to do, but also, to create that platform or atmosphere so that a lot of people would come and visit that particular region because of the investment that you've made in that.
Happy that you've brought this up. Because apart from the specific government institutions that directly promote tourism, like the Ghana Tourism Authority, the Tourist Development Board, you also need other state institutions that have a role to play in creating a conducive environment for tourism. For example, security. You can't have a viable tourist industry in any country without securing the country as a safe haven. And so national security has to be involved. Our national security apparatus must have a strategic focus on how to create Ghana as a safe tourist destination. But also institutions like the Environmental Protection Agency, they also have a role indirectly to play in supporting the tourist industry, because every tourist would like to go to places where you find that
there's serenity.
They're clean and serene and things like that.
Right.
And so there's different agencies that can complement the efforts of those public sector institutions that directly promote tourism. So it is a total government machinery effort if you are really interested in promoting tourism.
Through the World Bank, you, when you were a minister under Kufuor's administration, decided to create an industrial hub in the Ashanti region.
Yes.
Now, that brings into the fore what you're going to do in creating tourism hubs in other parts of the country, not necessarily the ones that have the faults and things like that. Because, and again, I blame you because you don't tell your story. Because what you've done in the Ashanti region is brilliant. The industrial hub and things like that. And I know that you created it in such a way that it cannot be truncated, even though you are not there. So it tells me that you are a builder. It tells me that you're somebody who can actually create something out of nothing.
And that's what leadership is
absolutely.
about.
So what do you intend to do for the other regions? And I cite you an example in Dubai, for instance. It was desert.
Complete desert.
Now all of us want to fly to Dubai.
You're right.
So I mean, can you? Is it something that you have in contemplation?
Yes, every region in Ghana has some form of tourist attraction, one way or the other. And it's amazing the potential that we have in different sites, different locations around the country. So even though we've designated under the GTP or under an Alam presidency, Central Region to become the new tourism hub for West Africa.
Okay.
Our proposal extends also to other regions.
Very well.
Where we identify existing locations or size tourist locations, and then still provide the same kind of support and assistance to the private sector to develop
a tourism city, like you said.
Yes, absolutely, yes. So if you take the industrial city in Ashanti region, in the greater Kumasi industrial area, even though essentially it is going to be the new manufacturing enclave or hub for West Africa, the kind of tourism infrastructure and facilities that will be built as part of the city will make it a very attractive investment, apart from it being for business.
Right.
You go to Kintampo, the Kintampo Falls is a major attraction, but you need to invest in developing that site. Not government, but the private sector investing in that site. And it's all very important that we understand the extent of the potential, not just in the forts and castles. If you look at beach tourism, we have fantastic beaches. You go to Western region, to Discove, Axim, all these fantastic, even Greater Accra here. So it is a question of developing the capacity of the private sector to put money into the infrastructure. So that's very important.
I like the tourism city. So we're going to bring it, build it in collaboration with private sector, ground up,
absolutely.
Design it.
I
love that. Akon wanted to do one in Senegal called the Akon City.
Oh, okay.
And the design and everything is the architecture is actually very beautiful. Yeah. I love that.
And then also, if you go to places like Cape Coast, Kotokraba, and Paidu, all these areas, people who go to visit the castle, the Cape Coast Castle, Emina Castle, have literally nothing to do after the visit.
After the visit, that's true. That's a fact.
But if you go into the major tourist destinations, sometimes you have alleys, dark alleys, small roads, which are converted into 24/7, tourist walkways with cobblestones, with music, with good food. All these things are supposed to complement the fiscal infrastructure that we may have, which supports tourism. And this is not just Central region. In the Volta region, Afajato, one of the highest mountains in not only in Ghana but in West Africa. And for those who are interested in butterflies, in monkey sites, in different, these are things that we are losing track of because we are not developing the tourist locations.
I'm happy, honestly, because again, I'm from the Central region. And I kind of understand what you're saying, that once you're done with the Cape Coast Castle or Emina Castle, you're done. There's nothing more to do. So you want to now. So it also sort of gives credence to your creation of industrial cities. Yes, there's a fort or there's a castle in Elmina, but you're saying that beyond having the castle, you're also going to create something that will keep the people there and spend there. So when they spend, because that will also generate a lot of revenue and for the country, create jobs. Yeah.
Remember when we're discussing our
employment,
youth.
Yes, tourism.
We're talking about building enterprises, micro, small, medium enterprises around tourist locations. And there's no reason why young people living in these tourist locations cannot be assisted to develop small businesses, to develop craft products and artifacts which they can sell to tourists. All of us travel around the world, and whether it's
you want something with you,
want to memorialize your visit.
True.
And all these things are potential business activities that we don't take advantage of.
How do we raise funding for it? How do we finance tourism?
It comes back to the issue of incentivizing the private sector. Government does not have the resources to fund tourism in Ghana. It's over and over again. However, if we provide the right incentive regime, it will release funding and financing for the private sector to support tourism. But this can also be done if we have the right regulation.
Right.
That would get banks now also to lend to the private sector, those who are engaged in tourism activities. Because typically, you will not have banks having the appetite to support companies that go into tourism.
Indeed.
Because they see that as a risk if they don't attract the kind of traffic that will support the investment. So typically they will not finance, let's say, projects of that nature. However, if the banks, as we've indicated in the GTP, it says establish regulations that will require banks to reserve specific portions of their credit and investment funds specifically to support the tourism sector.
Right.
And then, of course, we have a tourism development levy, which is supposed to be a source of funding
for tourism development.
We have to make sure that it is going into the tourism industry and not being diverted.
Okay, that has been well explained. Again, let me use Rwanda as an example. I've lived in Rwanda, so I like to use Rwanda as an example. It's not like they are the perfect example, but in terms of tourism, it's a very good example. So they have what we call Visit Rwanda, and they have found a way of sponsoring Arsenal. So when you look at Arsenal's jersey, they have Visit Rwanda, as a form of promoting Rwanda and then branding the country. What do you have in terms of branding? Because branding is very important. First of all, even branding the country as very safe, and also branding the country as the destination for tourism is very important. I like what this government has done. I'm not one to come and lie. No doubt about that. This December events that they do, right? They've done well.
Yeah.
So
year of return.
Yeah. So the branding aspect is something that I'm a lot more interested in. So how are we going to do ours differently to ensure that we attract more tourists into the country?
So what we've proposed under the GTP or under Alan presidency is that we want to leverage Ghana's foreign missions and embassies as vehicles for branding and promoting Ghana.
Okay.
There's what we call domestic tourism, but to a large extent, you also would like to have tourists coming from outside your borders into Ghana, because they will typically bring in foreign exchange resources.
Indeed.
So apart from specifically branding Ghana as a tourist destination through the local Brand Ghana office, our foreign missions are the best vehicles to sell Ghana abroad. And that's part of what we call commercial diplomacy. So that is one of the key things. You don't really see our missions and embassies playing that role as tourist ambassadors. And that's exactly what we are seeking to do. But it goes beyond the missions also.
Right.
It also is talking about engaging Ghanaians living abroad and the diaspora to become brand ambassadors to promote Ghana as a first-class tourist destination. So the missions are important, but Ghanaians themselves living abroad can be encouraged as patriotic citizens or Ghanaians now become agents for selling Ghana abroad. You know, can you imagine if every Ghanaian living abroad is able to market Ghana to a friend or two to come into and to have a taste of our country? That in itself would be a major effort on our part. Because if you are a Ghanaian, you are well disposed to be able to articulate what Ghana can offer as an investment destination.
Right. So, to achieve all of these, and we're wrapping up on tourism.
Yes.
You know, there's the need for us to invest hugely in air carrier services as an instrument for promoting tourism.
Yeah.
And also there's the need to develop, you know, the creative industry and also skills development and all of that. How do you intend to do all of that? Just about 3 minutes.
Yeah, because we have
you want to establish a national airline.
We have not had the benefit of a national airline for a very long time, since the days of the Ghana Airways. You know. It is important because everywhere that tourism is an important sector in the economy.
There's a national airline.
The national airline or a home-based carrier that facilitates travel from around the world to your country. Clearly, it's a major part of what you need to promote tourism. And part of the proposal under the GTP is to make Ghana the mecca of peoples of African descent. Now, you know what happens in Mecca. Muslims all over the world congregate in Mecca every year. And now, so making Ghana the mecca of people of African descent is taking the year of return to another level. And to do that, if you have a national airline, it will make things much, much easier. Of course, it will not just facilitate in terms of the availability of flights, but it would also make the costs of air travel to Ghana much cheaper. Because if you don't have control over foreign airlines, then that cannot become a major instrument for facilitating tourism. And of course, there's also the issue of making sure that the marketing of Ghana as a tourist destination is done at a very high level, because if you look at CNN, you have Rwanda
having its adverts there,
Yes. So it's all part of it. And once you get to that level of branding and marketing, and you have an air carrier service, and you can even have cruise ships. You can have cruise ships that are coming specifically to Ghana. And you know what cruise ships can do. You know? So that's the kind of level that an Allen presidency is going to take.
So maybe
tourism.
you are going to be very intentional and deliberate about
Very
these
deliberate
things.
about it. Very deliberate about it.
There are so many questions I want to ask you, but unfortunately our time is up. But finally, you know, for tourism, one would like to say that it's connected to transportation.
Yes, yes.
And looking at our road networks and things like that in the country, it's terrible. In Rwanda, I stayed in a small town called Nyanza.
Nyanza, I know Nyanza.
Yeah, Nyanza. And from Kigali to Nyanza, you've seen the roads.
Yes,
it's beautiful. You know, it's not deplorable. It's more trouble. And so, you know, when somebody is from Kigali and go to Nyanza, they're okay. They will just drive on that road. But if you look at from even Cape Coast to, what's it called? The other tourist side just escaped me.
Kakum?
Kakum Park. The road is horrendous.
Oh, tell me about that.
So how do we, Yeah, how do we ensure that? Just
No,
few
but,
seconds.
but it comes back to the point you made
Yeah.
earlier on, that different state institutions have a role
To play.
It's not just
Right.
the Ministry of Tourism.
Right.
But you're talking about roads,
Yeah.
you're talking about other ministries.
Yeah.
They all have but I cannot end without just making mention of the fact that you also need to develop the human resource capacity.
Right.
You know, this is a service industry. You need to have well-trained personnel within the sector, within the industry, that will take tourism to another level in Ghana.
Thank you very much, sir, for your time today.
Thank you.
This has been our time on Alan Speaks Primetime Show. My name is Kwame Owusu. So a big thank you to you for watching today's edition. We'll be back next week. Stay with us. We love you. Bye-bye.